The coffee in my cup had gone cold, untouched, just like the pit in my stomach when I remembered that day. I traced the rim with my finger, the ceramic smooth beneath my touch, grounding me as the memories rushed back. I should have known. Tanisha would be there, my perfect older sister, the golden child who never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. The elevator ride up to the 32nd floor had felt like an ascent to my own execution. Each ding of the passing floors was a countdown to my humiliation. My reflection in the polished metal doors staring back at me, blazer to stiff, makeup to careful, the nervous energy radiating off me in waves. I had practiced my answers in the mirror all morning, repeating them until my voice stopped shaking. But no amount of preparation could have braced me for what waited in that conference room. When the doors slid open, the office sprawled before me, all glass and steel, the hum of hushed conversations, the click of expensive shoes against marble. The receptionist smiled politely, but her eyes flickered over me in that way people do when they're already measuring your worth. I smoothed my skirt, took a breath, and stepped forward. Then I heard it, that laugh. Sharp, melodic, laced with amusement at someone else's expense. My spine stiffened before I even turned. Tanisha stood there, flawless in her tailored designer suit, her manicured fingers tapping a file against her palm. Her smirk was razor sharp, the same one she'd worn since we were kids when she'd steal my toys just to watch me cry. "Oh, this is adorable," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. My baby sister, playing dress up in a real office. The receptionist glanced between us, uncomfortable. I forced a smile, my nails digging into my palms. "I didn't know you worked here," I said, keeping my voice steady. She laughed, tossing her hair over one shoulder. "Of course you didn't. You never ask about my life, do you? Too busy being the family's poor little Mira, always the victim." The words stung, but I swallowed them down. I was used to this. Tanisha had spent years carving her superiority into my skin, turning every achievement of mine into something small, something insignificant. But today wasn't about her. Today was mine. The interview started normally enough, the panel asking about my experience, my strengths, my vision for the role. I answered carefully, my voice gaining strength with each response. Then Tanisha leaned forward, flipping through my resume like it was a joke. "Let's be real," she said, addressing the room instead of me. "This is cute, but do we really want to hire someone whose biggest achievement is an internship at a no-name firm?" One of the interviewers shifted uncomfortably. Another chuckled nervously. My face burned, but I kept my chin up. "I earned every line on that resume," I said quietly. Tanisha smirked. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't some charity. We hire winners here." The air in the room thickened. My chest tightened, the old familiar ache creeping in, the one that always came when she reduced me to nothing. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the door swung open. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The panel members straightened in their seats. Tanisha's smirk faltered, and there he was, Rowan, my Rowan, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, his expression unreadable until his eyes landed on me. Then, just for a second, I saw it, the warmth, the quiet reassurance, the same look he gave me when I woke up from nightmares, when I doubted myself, when the world felt too heavy. He didn't say anything at first, just walked in, his presence commanding the room. Then his gaze flicked to Tanisha and his jaw tightened. "I believe," he said, his voice dangerously calm. We were in the middle of evaluating my fiancé's qualifications. Silence, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, thick and suffocating. Tanisha's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The panel members exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning realization. And me? I sat there, watching my sister's composure crumble, piece by piece. All those years of her cruel remarks, the subtle digs at family dinners, the way she'd always made sure I knew my place second best, the afterthought, the disappointment, and now she was the one standing there exposed, because the man she'd spent months bragging about working for, the CEO she name-dropped at every opportunity, he was mine, and for the first time in my life, the power wasn't in her hands. It was in mine. The silence in that conference room was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Rowan didn't move from where he stood behind me, his hands still resting protectively on my shoulders. I could feel the tension radiating through His fingertips, the barely contained anger he always masked so well in professional settings. But I knew him. I knew the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his voice dropped to that deceptively calm tone. He was furious. Tanish's mouth opened, then closed again. I watched, transfixed, as her manicured fingers gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The executives around us shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us like spectators at a car crash. They couldn't look away from Mr. Chandran. One of them finally ventured, clearing his throat. "We weren't aware that my fiancé was interviewing today," Rowan finished smoothly, though the edge in his voice was unmistakable. "No, I imagine you weren't. Just as I wasn't aware that personal attacks were part of our evaluation process." Tanisha flinched. I'd never seen her flinch before. The air between us crackled with something unspoken, years of buried resentment, of quiet cruelty disguised as sisterly teasing, of always being made to feel like I was less. And now in this moment, the scales had tipped. Rowan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at the room. "We'll resume this discussion later," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then softer, "Just for me. Come with me." I stood on shaky legs, my knees threatening to buckle. I didn't look at Tanisha as I walked past her. I didn't need to. The weight of her stare burned into my back, a mixture of disbelief and something else, something that almost resembled fear. His office was quiet, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city in a way that should have felt empowering. Instead, I just felt numb. Rowan closed the door behind us, and the second it clicked shut, I collapsed into the nearest chair, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. He was beside me in an instant, kneeling so we were eye level. "Breathe," he murmured, his hands cradling mine. "Just breathe." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to steady myself. She always does this," I choked out. "Every time I try to stand on my own, I know," he said quietly. "I know." And he did. He'd seen the aftermath of Tanisha's barbs too many times, the nights I'd come home crying after family gatherings, the way I'd second-guess every accomplishment because she'd conditioned me to believe it wasn't enough. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. "Did you know she worked here?" He shook his head. "Not until I walked into that room." A beat. Then reluctantly, "But I've heard the name. She's been angling for a promotion." A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course she had. Tanisha was always climbing, always maneuvering. And now she'd just sabotaged herself in front of the one person whose opinion actually mattered. Rowan studied me, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "What do you want to do?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I could walk away, let her keep her job, her pride, the illusion of victory. Or I could stay. I looked down at our intertwined hands, then back up at him. "I want the job," I said quietly. "Not because of you. Because I earned it." Something like pride flickered in his expression. He nodded once. "Then you have it." The knock came less than an hour later. I was still in Rowan's office, sipping the tea he'd ordered for me, when his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss Tanisha Sharma is here to see you, sir." Rowan's eyes met mine. "Send her in." The door opened, and Tanisha stepped inside, but the woman who walked in was a far cry from the smug, composed sister I'd faced earlier. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick bitten off. When her gaze landed on me, something raw flashed in her eyes. "Mira," she started, then stopped, as if she hadn't planned what to say beyond my name. Rowan leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively relaxed. "Did you need something, Miss Sharma?" The use of her formal name wasn't lost on any of us. Tanisha swallowed. "I came to apologize." The words sounded foreign coming from her mouth. Tanisha didn't apologize. Tanisha made excuses, twisted narratives, made you feel like you'd overreacted. But an actual apology? That was new. I set my cup down. "For which part?" My voice was steadier than I expected. "For humiliating me in front of the panel? Or for spending our entire lives making sure I never believed in myself?" Her jaw tightened. "I didn't realize that I was dating your boss," I finished coldly. "Would it have mattered if I wasn't? Or would you still have torn me apart just because you could?" For the first time in my life, Tanisha looked small. "It wasn't like that," she muttered. "Then what was it like?" I stood, facing her fully. "Because from where I'm standing, you saw an opportunity to remind me of my place, and you took it." As always, the silence stretched. Then I was jealous. The admission was so quiet I almost missed it. Tanish's hands clenched at her sides. You were always the one people liked. The sweet one. The kind one. No matter what I achieved. It was never enough to, she cut herself off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry. I stared at her, my chest aching with something I couldn't name. All these years, I'd thought her cruelty came from a place of superiority. But this sounded like insecurity. Rowan cleared his throat. Your apology is noted, he said evenly. However, your behavior today was unacceptable. HR will be in touch regarding disciplinary action. Tanish paled but nodded. As she turned to leave, I spoke without thinking. Wait, she paused, her back still to me. I took a deep breath. We're not done, but we'll talk later. She didn't respond, just walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. Rowan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You okay? I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl idolizing her big sister, ached with something dangerously close to pity. I will be, I said finally, and for the first time, I actually believed it. The moment I stepped into the office the next morning, I could feel the stares. Whispers trailed behind me like shadows as I walked to my new desk, not in the cramped cubicles where junior staff worked, but in the spacious corner office Rowan had insisted on. The glass walls suddenly felt less like a privilege and more like a fishbowl. Everyone knew now. Everyone had an opinion. My assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Margaret, handed me a coffee without asking how I took it. They'll get over it, she said simply, following my gaze to where a group of employees quickly looked away. Office gossip has a shorter shelf life than milk. I tried to smile, but my hands were shaking. Last night had been a sleepless haze of replaying Tanish's words, her expression, that fragile moment of vulnerability when she admitted she was jealous. Me, the girl who'd spent her life in Tanish's dazzling shadow. Margaret cleared her throat. HR wants to see you at 10. And your sister? She hesitated. She's been placed on probation, pending review. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. The HR office smelled like lemon cleaner and anxiety. Mr. Kapoor, the head of HR, steepled his fingers as I sat across from him. We take workplace harassment very seriously, Miss Sharma. The use of my last name made my stomach twist. It was the same as hers. He slid a file toward me. We have statements from everyone present in that interview room. What your sister did was, he searched for a diplomatic word, unprofessional. I opened the file. Transcript stared back at me, every condescending remark, every laugh at my expense, captured in sterile black and white. Seeing it laid out like that, without Tanish's charming smile to soften the edges, was jarring. What happens now? I asked quietly. That depends partly on you, Mr. Kapoor adjusted his glasses. Do you want to press formal charges? It would mean an investigation, possible termination. The word termination echoed. I thought of Tanish's perfect apartment, her designer handbags, the way she'd built her entire identity around being successful. Who would she be without that? I need time to think. I found her in the break room, staring into a cup of tea like it held answers. For the first time in our lives, Tanisha looked tired. She didn't look up as I sat across from her. Here to gloat? The automatic barb. Old habits. No, I waited until she met my eyes. Why did you really do it? Her fingers tightened around the cup. I told you, I was jealous. Yeah. I leaned forward. But of what? You had everything. You are everything Mom and Dad wanted. A bitter laugh escaped her. Is that what you think? Then she did something that shocked me. She pulled out her phone and opened an album. Look. The screen showed a younger version of us at a school play. Tanisha stood center stage in a glittering costume, beaming. And there I was in the corner, barely visible. See how they're all looking at you? She said. I frowned. What? No, they're not the audience. She zoomed in. Our parents sat in the front row. Dad was filming, but the camera wasn't pointed at Tanisha in the spotlight. It was angled toward where I stood awkwardly in the chorus line. My big solo, she whispered. And Dad couldn't take his eyes off you. The memory came rushing back, how I'd been so nervous I'd tripped on stage. How Dad had laughed affectionately instead of scolding. How Tanisha had raged afterward, accusing me of ruining her night. I'd thought she was being dramatic. All these years, she'd been hurting. The elevator dinged on the executive floor. Rowan was waiting when the doors opened, his expression softening when he saw my face. That bad? I collapsed into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. I don't know what to do. He stroked my hair. About any of it. I pulled back. HR wants me to decide if she gets fired. Mom's been calling nonstop. And now I find out half our childhood fights were because she thought our parents liked me better? Rowan guided me to the couch. Families are complicated. Understatement of the century. He studied me. What do you want? I stared out at the skyline. I want to not feel guilty for succeeding. I want her to stop making everything a competition. My voice broke. I want my sister back. The admission hung between us. Rowan squeezed my hand. Then fight for her. Her apartment building was just as intimidating as she was, all sleek lines and doormen who looked like secret agents. Tanisha opened the door on the first knock, already dressed in pajamas despite it being barely 7 p.m. We stared at each other. Can I come in? I asked. She stepped aside wordlessly. Her home was exactly as I'd imagined: pristine white furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my car. Not a single item out of place. The only sign of chaos was the half-packed suitcase on the couch. Going somewhere? I asked. She shrugged. Figured I'd be fired tomorrow. Thought I might as well take a vacation. The resignation in her voice was worse than any tantrum. I took a deep breath. I told HR I wouldn't press charges. Her head snapped up. Why? Because I met her gaze. I remember the sister who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I had nightmares. That's the sister I want back. Tanisha's eyes glistened. That girl's long gone, Mira. Bullshit. The curse startled us both. You're still in there? I saw her today when you showed me that photo. She turned away, but not before I saw the tear escape. I reached into my bag and pulled out a battered showbox. Remember these? Inside were decades worth of memories: concert tickets, dried flowers, silly notes we'd passed in school, the relics of a relationship we'd both thought was lost. Tanisha touched a faded movie stub with trembling fingers. You kept all this? Of course I did. For the first time in years, my sister hugged me. And for the first time in even longer, it didn't feel like a competition. The morning after our fragile reconciliation, I woke to 12 missed calls from our mother. Sunlight streamed through my apartment windows as I stared at my buzzing phone, the caller ID flashing Mom like a warning. Rowan stirred beside me, his arms slung protectively over my waist even in sleep. I should have known word would spread this fast in our family. Secrets had a shorter lifespan than fruit FLIs. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, my father called. Rowan's sleepy voice rumbled against my shoulder. You can't avoid them forever. I can try, I muttered, but swiped answer. Mira. Mom's voice was shrill enough that I held the phone away from my ear. What is this nonsense about you getting Tanisha fired? After everything she's done for you? The accusation hit like a slap. Of course Tanisha had called them first. Of course she'd spun the story to make herself the victim. Some things never changed. I sat up, the sheets pooling around me. Actually, Mom, I'm the one who stopped them from firing her. Silence. Then, in a completely different tone. What? The family brunch was Mom's idea, her patented conflict resolution method that usually involved copious amounts of wine and everyone pretending nothing was wrong. Rowan squeezed my knee under the table as we sat across from Tanisha in our parents' sun-drenched dining room. She looked exhausted, her usually flawless makeup barely covering the dark circles under her eyes. Mom fluttered between the kitchen and table, arranging dishes with military precision. I just don't understand why you girls can't let it go, Priya, Dad interrupted, uncharacteristically firm. He fixed Tanisha with a look I couldn't decipher. Did you really mock your sister during a job interview? Tanisha's fork clattered against her plate. The sound seemed to echo. All eyes turned to her. I held my breath. This was at the moment she'd either take responsibility or twist the narrative like always. She surprised me. Yes, the admission was barely audible. And it wasn't the first time. Mom froze, a serving spoon suspended mid-air. What do you mean? Tanisha wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. Remember when Mira didn't get into Stanford? My stomach dropped. That rejection had devastated 17-year-old me. I may have intercepted her acceptance letter. The room spun. All these years I'd believed I wasn't good enough. You what? The words tore from my throat. Rowan's hand tightened on mine, his expression darkening. Tanisha finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears I hadn't seen since we were children. I was terrified you'd leave me behind, that you'd be off doing amazing things while she trailed off, but the implication hung heavy. While she stayed stuck in the shadow of her own making, Dad pushed back from the table so violently his chair toppled. All this time, he said, voice shaking, we thought Mira wasn't applying herself. He cut himself off, running a hand over his face. Mom sat down hard, her face ashen. The scholarship. I didn't understand until the pieces clicked together. The scholarship for state schools that had been my consolation prize. The way Dad had quietly paid my tuition after my rejection to every elite school I'd applied to. Tanisha hadn't just stolen an acceptance letter, she'd altered the course of my life. The car ride home was silent except for the rhythmic click of the turn signal. Rowan kept stealing glances at me, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Say something, he finally said. I stared out the window at the blur of city lights. What is there to say? He exhaled sharply. Mira, this isn't just some sisterly squabble. She sabotaged your future. The anger in his voice should have comforted me, someone finally taking my side unequivocally. Instead, it made me feel strangely hollow. I know, I whispered, but the truth was more complicated. Because intertwined with the betrayal was an unsettling realization. Tanisha's cruelty had never been about my inadequacies. It had always been about her own. My phone buzzed at 3:17 a.m. Tanisha, can we talk? I stared at the message until the screen timed out. The apartment was silent except for Rowan's steady breathing beside me. Outside, the occasional car passed, headlights painting fleeting patterns across the ceiling. I should have ignored it, should have let her stew in the consequences of her actions. Instead, I found myself typing. Where? The 24-hour diner was nearly empty, the vinyl booth sticky under my palms as I slid into the seat across from her. Tanisha looked wrecked, no makeup, hair piled in a messy bun, wearing what appeared to be pajama bottoms under her coat. She pushed a milkshake toward me, strawberry, my favorite since we were kids. A peace offering. I didn't know you still remembered, I said quietly. Her smile was fragile. I remember everything. For a long moment, we just sat there, two sisters separated by years of resentment and a table that suddenly felt too wide. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Stanford never rescinded your acceptance, she said, voice breaking. I just never mailed your reply. The world tilted. Inside were documents I'd never seen, orientation packets, housing forms, all dated 15 years ago with my name printed neatly across the top, all marked return to sender. Tanisha's hands shook as she pushed them toward me. I've been carrying this around for years, waiting for the right moment to. She trailed off. To what? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Apologize? Or just torture yourself? Both? The honesty stunned me. Outside, dawn began to bleed across the skyline, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere beyond the diner windows, the city was waking up, unaware that my entire past was being rewritten in a grimy booth. Over stale coffee, Tanisha wiped her cheeks roughly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I really studied her for the first time in years. The sister who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd held my hair back when I got drunk at my first high school party, who'd somehow become so afraid of being left behind that she'd push me away instead. I don't know if I can, I said honestly. Then, before I could stop myself, but I'd like to try. Her breath hitched, and in that moment, with the first light of morning spilling across the table between us, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, the beginning of it. The Stanford envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I found myself circling it like a wild animal, picking it up, only to set it down again whenever the weight of what it represented became too much. Rowan had taken one look at it that first morning and quietly made coffee, his silence more telling than any words could be. On the 4th day, the envelope disappeared. I tore apart the apartment in a panic before finding it tucked safely in my nightstand drawer with a note in Rowan's precise handwriting. When you're ready. That small act of understanding undid me more than any grand gesture could have. The office felt different now. Where once there had been whispers behind my back, now there were awkward silences when I entered rooms. Tanisha kept to her department, and I kept to mine, our paths crossing only when absolutely necessary. It should have been a relief. Instead, the distance ached like a phantom limb. Margaret noticed, of course. She always did. Stop staring at the elevator, she said, without looking up from her computer. I wasn't. You've glanced at it 14 times this morning. She finally met my eyes. Either call her or don't. This middle ground is giving you wrinkles. The bluntness startled a laugh out of me. Since when are you my life coach? Since your love life stopped being interesting. She slid a file across my desk. Now focus. These contracts won't read themselves. I opened the file and froze.it was the Parker account, Tanish's biggest client. Margaret smirked at my expression. HR reassigned them. Apparently certain employees aren't allowed to work together anymore. The victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it settled like ash in my mouth. Rowan found me that evening sitting on our balcony, the Stanford envelope in my lap. Talk to me, he said, settling beside me. The night air was cool against my skin, the city lights twinkling below like scattered stars. For a long moment, I just listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing, anchoring myself in the present. I keep thinking about alternate universes, I said finally. The version of me who got that acceptance letter, who went to Stanford, who never met me. His voice was carefully neutral. I turned to study his profile, the strong jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that appeared whenever he was trying not to show emotion. My rock, my constant, who never needed to, I corrected softly, because that mirror wouldn't have been running from anything. The realization hit with startling clarity. All these years, I'd thought Tanisha had stolen my future, but she'd also inadvertently given me something precious, the path that led me here. To this man, to this life. Rowan exhaled shakily, his shoulders relaxing. So what now? I traced the edges of the envelope. Now I stopped letting the past define me. The knock on Tanisha's office door the next morning startled us both. She looked up from her computer, her expression shuddering when she saw me. Here. To gloat about the Parker account, I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. No, the office was exactly as I'd imagined, immaculate, expensive, and somehow impersonal. The only hint of the sister I once knew was the framed photo on her desk. Two little girls building a sandcastle, their smiles gap-toothed and carefree. I pointed to it. Remember when you pushed me into the water after this was taken? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. You dumped sand in my hair first. Because you stole my shovel. Because you were hogging it. The old argument hung between us, familiar as a favorite sweater. For the first time in years, it felt like we were speaking the same language. I took a deep breath. I'm not giving the Parker account back. Tanisha stiffened. But, I continued, I think we should work on the Delmonico project together. Her eyes widened. Delmonico was our biggest client, yet a make or break deal for the entire company. Why? Because despite everything, I said, holding her gaze, you're still the best strategist I know. The admission cost me. I saw the moment it registered, the slight tremble in her hands, the rapid blink as she fought back tears. You shouldn't forgive me, she whispered. I haven't. I stepped closer. But I'd like to try. The words echoed our conversation in the diner, coming full circle. Tanisha studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. For what it's worth, she said, voice rough. That version of you, the one who went to Stanford. She shook her head. She couldn't possibly be happier than you are right now. The unexpected insight stole my breath. Because she was right. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The Delmonico conference room smelled like expensive coffee and nervous sweat. I adjusted my blazer for the 10th time in as many minutes, watching as executives filed in around the massive mahogany table. This was it, the project that could make or break both our careers. And somehow, impossibly, I was doing it with Tanisha. She sat across from me, posture perfect, her tablet arranged just so before her. To anyone else, she looked the picture of cool confidence. But I saw the slight tremor in her fingers as she straightened her water glass. The barely there tension around her eyes. She was as terrified as I was. Mr. Delmonico himself entered last, flanked by assistants. At 73, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. His sharp gaze swept the room before landing on me. So, he said without preamble, you're the sister. The air left my lungs. Tanisha stiffened. Then, to everyone's shock, especially mine, she laughed. Not her polished corporate laugh, but the real one I hadn't heard in years. The one that used to make our parents scold us at dinner parties. Actually, Mr. Delmonico, she said, eyes sparkling, I'm the other sister. A beat of stunned silence. Then the old man threw back his head and roared with laughter. I like these girls, he announced to the room. Finally, someone with some damn personality in this place. Just like that, the tension shattered. Working with Tanisha was like rediscovering a forgotten language. Late nights in the office became a strange echo of our childhood huddled over textbooks, passing notes under our parents' noses. Only, now it was spreadsheets instead of homework, and the stakes were considerably higher. "You're still a nightmare with highlighters," Tanisha muttered one evening, scowling at my color-coded notes. "You're still a control freak." I shot back automatically. We both froze, the old rhythm catching us off guard. Then slowly, Tanisha smiled. A real one. The moment shattered when Rowan appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Working? Late again?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. I'd been canceling our dates for days, lost in the whirlwind of the project, and if I was honest, the novelty of having my sister back. Tanisha glanced between us and stood abruptly. I should head out. The silence after she left was deafening. Rowan ran a hand through his hair. "We need to talk." The restaurant was Rowan's favorite, quiet, intimate, the kind of place where the waiters remembered your wine preferences. Normally I loved it. Tonight, the white tablecloths and soft violin music felt like a stage set for bad news. He waited until we'd ordered before speaking. "You're getting too close to her again." The accusation hung between us. I stirred my drink, the ice clinking. "Like a countdown. She's my sister, and she's hurt you more times than I can count." His voice was low, urgent. "What happens when this project ends, Mira? When she doesn't need you anymore?" The question hit like a punch. Because it wasn't just paranoia, it was history. Tanisha had always been most attentive when she wanted something. I stared at my reflection in the window, distorted by the night and the city lights beyond. People can change, can they? He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "I just don't want to see you hurt again." The genuine worry in his eyes made my chest ache. Because he wasn't wrong to be concerned, but neither was I. The flashback hit me mid-presentation. One moment I was explaining quarterly projections to Delmonico's board. The next, I was 12 years old again, standing in a middle school auditorium. My science project destroyed by mysterious circumstances. Right before judging, Tanisha had been the first to comfort me, and the last to meet my eyes. "Mira, Mr. Delmonico's voice snapped me back. The entire board was staring. My palms were sweating, the laser pointer shaking in my hand. Then Tanisha stepped forward smoothly. "What my colleague means to say is no." The word came out sharper than I intended. I took a steadying breath. "What I mean to say is that these numbers don't tell the full story." And then I did something completely unplanned. I tossed the presentation. Gasps rippled through the room as I closed the laptop. "The real opportunity isn't in these spreadsheets," I said, voice growing stronger. "It's in the human element your competitors are ignoring." Tanisha's eyes widened. This wasn't the script we'd rehearsed, but as I laid out the new vision, one rooted in personal connections rather than cold analytics, something remarkable happened. She started nodding, then adding points, then finishing my sentences. By the time we finished, Delmonico was grinning. "Now that," he declared, "is what I call a damn partnership." The text came at midnight. "Remember when you used to sneak into my room after nightmares?" I stared at Tanisha's message, the glow of my phone, the only light in our dark bedroom. Rowan slept soundly beside me, his arm draped protectively over my waist. I typed back, "You let me sleep on your floor even though I kicked in my sleep." The reply came instantly. I lied. "You snored like a chainsaw." A surprised laugh escaped me. Rowan stirred but didn't wake. Another message appeared. "Thank you for today. Simple, sincere." The kind of words that would have stuck in her throat a month ago. As I drifted off, my last thought was that Rowan might be right to worry, but for the first time in years, I was right to hope. The Delmonico contract signing should have been a victory. Instead, I stood frozen in the office lobby, staring at the bouquet of white lilies in the receptionist's hands. Their cloying scent filled the air. Mom's favorite. The card tucked between the blooms was unmistakably her handwriting, "For my brilliant daughters." Tanisha appeared beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "She never sent flowers when I closed deals alone," she muttered. The bitter edge in her voice was familiar, but now I heard the hurt beneath it. Our mother's favoritism had always been a pendulum swinging violently between us. Margaret cleared her throat. "Mr. Delmonico's waiting." The private dining room at Le Bernardin was everything our childhood kitchen hadn't been. Crisp linens, sparkling crystal, waiters who refilled glasses before they were empty. Delmonico held court at the head of the table, regaling us with stories of his early days. And that's when I learned, he boomed, stabbing his steak for emphasis. The only thing more dangerous than an enemy is a partner who stops being hungry. His gaze landed meaningfully on me and Tanisha. Rowan, seated to my left, tensed almost imperceptibly. He'd been quiet all evening, his polite smile not reaching his eyes. Delmonico wiped his mouth with a napkin. Which brings me to my proposal. He signaled his assistant, who produced 2 envelopes. I want to take Chandran and Co. International, and I want you too. He pointed between us, to lead the London office. The room tilted. London, a continent away from Rowan, from our parents, from everything familiar. Tanisha's breath hitched beside me. Delmonico grinned. Think about it. The argument started the second we got home. You're actually considering this. Rowan's voice was dangerously calm as he shrugged off his suit jacket. I sat on the edge of our bed, still clutching the envelope. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. For who? He turned, eyes blazing. For you? Or for you and Tanisha? The accusation hung between us. I stood abruptly, the silk of my dress whispering against my thighs. This isn't about her, isn't it? He ran a hand through his hair. Ever since you two reconnected, it's like he cut himself off. But the words vibrated in the air anyway, like I don't know where I stand anymore. My phone buzzed. Tanisha's name flashed on the screen. Can you believe it? I didn't pick up. The flashback came without warning, one of the rare good memories. 13-year-old Tanisha and 11-year-old me sprawled on her bedroom floor, a battered atlas between us. Her finger traced the Thames. When I'm CEO, she declared, we'll live in London. You'll run the European division. I'd giggled. Mom would never let us. That's why we won't tell her until we're on the plane. She'd grinned, pinky extended. Deal. Deal. Our childish fingers had locked, sealing a promise that had somehow survived all the betrayals. Now, standing in my silent apartment with Rowan's hurt radiating across the room, that long-forgotten vow tightened around my chest like a vice. I found Tanisha at our old playground. She sat motionless on a rusted swing, the chains creaking in the autumn wind. In her corporate sheath and heels, she looked absurdly out of place amidst the faded slides and monkey bars. Without a word, I took the swing beside her. For minutes, the only sound was the rhythmic squeak of metal and the distant laughter of children. Finally, she spoke. I turned it down. The admission startled me. What? She dug her heel into the dirt, stopping her swing's motion. London. I told Delmonico no. The evening light caught the silver strands in her hair, ones I'd never noticed before. When had my big sister started going gray? Why? I asked softly. She met my eyes. Because you have a life here, a beat. With Rowan, the unspoken addition, hung between us, and I won't be the reason you lose it. In that moment, I really saw her for perhaps the first time. Not the villain of my story, or the broken girl seeking redemption. Just a woman who'd spent so long fighting imaginary battles that she'd forgotten how to lay down her arms. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I didn't have to choose between them, but I did have to choose me. Rowan was waiting on our balcony when I returned, his silhouette outlined by the city lights. I joined him without speaking, pressing my shoulder against his. The familiar warmth steadied me. I told Tanisha no, I said quietly. He turned, searching my face. And I took a deep breath. I'm not going to London, but not because of you. Because it's not what I want. The distinction was crucial. For years, I'd let myself be pulled along by other people's currents, Tanisha's manipulations, our parents' expectations, even Rowan's protective nest. And no more. To his credit, Rowan understood immediately. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. What do you want? The question should have been simple. But as I stared out at the glittering skyline, the answer came in fragments. The satisfaction of building something myself, the messy, complicated love of a sister who was trying, this man beside me, who'd loved me even when I struggled to love myself. Time, I said finally, to figure it out without someone else's script. He brought our joined hands to his lips. Then that's what we'll do. Somewhere across the city, my sister was making her own choices. And for the first time, they didn't have to define mine. The rain fell in silver sheets against the hospital windows, distorting the city lights into watery streaks of color. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, watching my breath fog the surface. Behind me, machines beeped a steady rhythm. The Soundtrack of waiting rooms everywhere. A hand touched my shoulder. She's asking for you. Rowan's voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. He smelled like hospital coffee and the faint citrus of his cologne, familiar anchors in this surreal night. I turned to face him, taking in the exhaustion lining his eyes. How bad is it? He didn't insult me with platitudes. The doctor said it's touch and go. The words landed like stones in my stomach. Just yesterday, Tanisha had been fine laughing over lunch, teasing me about my newfound love of gardening. Then the call came at midnight. A car accident on the bridge. Now here we were. I smoothed my wrinkled sweater, buying time before facing what waited beyond those doors. Do Mom and Dad know? Rowan nodded. They're on their way from the airport. He hesitated. Mira, she asked for you first. That stopped me mid-step. In our family, hierarchy was everything. For Tanisha to break protocol, the thought fractured as I pushed through the ICU doors. The woman in the bed barely resembled my sister. Tanisha lay swathed in tubes and wires, her usually flawless hair matted against the pillow. One eye was swollen shut, the other fluttered open at my approach. Hey loser, she rasped. The old nickname, the one she'd coined when we were kids and I'd trailed after her like a lovesick puppy, undid me. A sob clawed up my throat. I caught her hand, careful of the four. You look like hell. Her laugh turned into a wince. Feel worse. For a moment, we just breathed together in the dim light. The beeping monitors marked time like a metronome. Then she spoke again, so quiet I had to lean in. I saw it, you know. Saw what? The light. Her fingers tightened around mine. When they were bringing me back, it was warm. A pause. Mom was there. My breath caught. Our mother had died 5 years ago, her heart giving out the same week Tanisha finally made VP. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Tanisha's eye fluttered closed. She said she was proud of me. The confession hung between us, fragile as a soap bubble. All our lives, we'd competed for that one elusive thing, a mother's unconditional love. To hear it granted now, in this liminal space between life and death, I swallowed hard. She should be. Dawn painted the sky in pale watercolors when the worst of the crisis passed. Rowan dozed in the waiting room chair, his long legs stretched awkwardly before him. I watched the sunrise gild his stubbled jaw, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheeks. 12 years together, and he still took my breath away. My phone buzzed. A text from the office, Margaret, no doubt, wanting updates. But the screen showed a different name entirely. Dr. A. Fisher, Stanford admissions. The world tilted. I'd applied on a whim months ago, never mentioning it to anyone. Not Rowan. Not even Tanisha. A secret dream tucked away like a love letter. In a drawer. Now here it was, glowing in my palm. Rowan stirred as my chair squeaked. She okay? I turned the phone face down. Stable. He studied me with those two perceptive eyes. What's wrong? The truth perched on my tongue, ready to take flight. But the moment wasn't right, not here, not now. So I leaned into him instead, breathing in his familiar scent. Just tired. His arms encircled me, solid and sure. Get some sleep. I've got you. And that was the crux of it, wasn't it? He always had. Tanisha's recovery was slow. I visited daily, reading aloud from the business journals she pretended not to miss. Sometimes we talked about London, the road not taken. Other times, we sat in comfortable silence, the kind we hadn't shared since childhood. It was during one such visit that I finally showed her the email. Her eyebrows shot up. Stanford? I braced for the old barbs, the subtle digs about not being good enough. Instead, she surprised me. You have to go. The certainty in her voice startled me. It's just a visiting professorship. 3 months, which you'd be insane to turn down. She adjusted her sling with a wince. Rowan will understand. Would he? The question had kept me awake for nights. We'd built a life here, a home, routines, inside jokes worn smooth with time. Was it fair to disrupt that? As if reading my thoughts, Tanisha squeezed my hand. He loves you enough to let you fly, Mira. Even if it's without him. The wisdom in her words didn't sound like my sister. But then, we'd both changed. The airport terminal buzzed with the usual chaos, crying babies, garbled announcements, the squeak of luggage wheels. Rowan stood beside me at the gate, his hand warm around mine. You have your charger? Yes, Dad. Passport? In my bag. And you'll call when? I silenced him with a kiss. Every day. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We both knew this was more than a business trip. It was the test we'd never taken, the one that would prove whether we could grow together or only apart. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Rowan cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. Go be brilliant. Tears blurred my vision as I turned toward the jetway. But before I stepped through, a familiar voice called my name. Tanisha stood at the security line, slightly breathless, her arms still in a sling. In her good hand, she clutched a battered showbox, the same one from all those months ago. Almost forgot, she panted, thrusting it at me. For luck. Inside lay our childhood treasures, the concert stubs, the dried flowers, the silly notes. And atop the pile, something new, a business card for Tanisha Sharma, partner with Chandran and Co. crossed out. Beneath it, freshly printed, Sharma, Sisters Consulting. My head snapped up. She shrugged, suddenly shy. Figured we'd need a name for when you get back. The implication hung between us, not if, but when. A vote of confidence in the sisterhood we'd fought so hard to rebuild. The flight attendant gave a final warning. I hugged Tanisha tight, the box pressed between us. Don't do anything stupid. While I'm gone, only if you don't. Laughing, I turned toward my future, one that no longer required abandoning my past. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I opened the box again. Nestled among the mementos was a faded photo I hadn't seen in years. Two little girls on a swing set, their smiles gap-toothed and carefree. On the back, in Tanisha's childhood scrawl, best sisters forever. And for the first time in our messy, complicated history, I believed it.